So today, I'm going a bit askance again. A little slightly, well, not really. I mean, so yes, I did mostly watch horror generally. I've not that been thrillers, but it's very much a sibling genre as well, I think, which incidentally I do not watch a lot of at all because I don't know, the fact that it's not fictional, I guess, makes it even more horrifying, I suppose, in a way. Horror being fiction is sort of like a shield, I suppose. And the fact that it's a movie as well, obviously, not real life. Like, something like yesterday's, any, most really, horror fiction is, you know, it is absurdly fictional, usually. So it can be supernatural and such. Not this, though. No, as it's a greatly changed version, at least. It's not, as I said, something that I usually watch at all. I've watched maybe 30 at best movies from this genre in total. I mean, overall, I've watched like thousands, so I really do not watch much at all. And as it happens, it's not the modern version. Apparently, there are more than one version. It's the war genre, right? If that wasn't obvious, it's not exactly the most exciting genre in my opinion. Still very much so can be categorized as, I suppose one could say, horror. I mean, real life horror when it actually happens, and on screen can still be. It can still have very much, horror tropes in a way. If it wants to have gore, I guess it's entirely within the realistic limit. So, whereas most horror, most fictional horror is very rarely realistic. This, on the other hand, well, things happen all the time in the world, even currently. But this is about uh, historic war, World War II, and specifically, apparently, Dunkirk. Not that I really do not care much about it at all. But I thought, why not? If I'm, not going to be very excited, and yeah, what I've watched in the past, I'm mostly interested in the strategies, maybe, how they console each other while doing nothing else. When the fighting is actually happening, it's not very. I mean, if you're there, obviously, it's not exciting. It's terrifying if you're there. On screen, personally, I don't think it excites me at all, or even entertains me. It just is kind of like the Goblin other fictional horror, to be fair. I really don't care much about it. No, I watch most movies really for the narrative, not any fancy special effects. And that's what they are ultimately. And these are movies, not a documentary. So I don't know how realistic this is, but this is a movie from 58. So that's 13 years after the war ended. So it was still relatively fresh in their minds, I assume. Yeah, sometimes I watch, like once I watched Tokyo Story, and that is even less. So that was even nearer to World War Two than this, and but it's not really anything to do with war, cause that's what's sort of clever about it. It doesn't. I think it mentions it maybe once. That's pretty much it. But it's interesting, of course, because of the context, because it's so old now, so it's basically a relic, and the fact that yeah, it they do discuss sort of existential topics. Let's say how people live and such. It's not a well, it's one of those Japanese movies that is quite meditative, sort of like Our Little Sister. But this one now is slightly different, I suppose. Yeah, war movies would be different. I have no idea how it compares with the modern version. I know it's for some reason it's Christopher Nolan, I think, that directed the newer one. No idea why. Maybe he likes playing his soldiers along with Batman, I guess. Maybe soldiers help Batman or something. Anyway, I'm assuming, I don't know, if that is more, that's less realistic. I mean, considering how he did Batman, I'm assuming it might be slightly less realistic. Maybe this is more realistic, but who knows? I'm certainly not going to watch the two versions and any close. I mean, I even left a month to watch the newer Suspiria, so and that was actually more interesting than a war movie could be. You know, in my opinion, war movies are very interesting. Honestly, don't know why I watch them sometimes, but why not? I mean, yeah, it's not like I don't read about history. I do that. I'm interested in that. But well, World War II movies in particular tend to be harrowing, obviously, and I think this would be as well because this a lot of there were a lot of casualties. It seems from what I remember from my reading. I don't think I've ever watched a movie version of this. I don't know. There's more than two. I certainly haven't watched this, and I haven't watched the modern version. So I don't think I have watched a movie version. I've watched some other uh, war movies from that era, where they either escape or uh, yeah, I remember some operations as well that they conducted. I also happen to have played a few war games, I guess you could call them. I really don't enjoy them as much either, but when it's bored, one can resort to everything. So yeah. Anyway, I'm going to just begin this. First thing I'm wondering, it's kind of irrelevant to the movie itself, but MGM's logo. I mean, I think I've seen it many times before. There's probably a difference between obviously this is black and white, so I'm assuming well, obviously if it has color, then it would be different. But I don't know if I'm thinking they might have replaced the lion. Well, I haven't read about it, but the lion looks different from what I'm used to. Somehow it seems to have more hair. Anyway, this is completely irrelevant. Begins really weirdly. It looks almost like a documentary, except they also show people laughing, so that doesn't happen in the documentary. But it pretty much is. It kind of sounds like newsreels. There's even some cartoons I actually have never seen before. And yeah, it's kind of funny that soldiers don't believe that they're prepared. Sort of, juxtaposition to what's happening currently with the this pandemic. Yeah, currently, yeah. Governments can say they're prepared, but not really. Some don't even want to prepare. So yeah. Anyway, at one point, that um, person in some sort of workshop, yeah, that seems to be convinced of Ho's pronouncements. This is something relevant as well to modern times, I think. The fact that they let, and they being, many things these days. She said that they let him broadcast on the radio. course, as far as I know, radio is very easy to broadcast on. I think it could be done from anywhere. I suppose. I think from with amateur radio, and they need to physically take it down to. So as far as I know, as long as Volvo was located in Germany, I think it was. I'm not sure. Then he could. I mean, unless Germans themselves took him down, which and he seems to be quite pleased broadcasting. So obviously they let him do that. No, this really is a commentary, I think, about how it happens online, of course, these days. I mean, it can still happen on radio. It does happen on radio. Even then, even if people want radio, I mean, these days, even if it's online radio, eh, something like Shoutcast, it's free and easy to use. Anyone with a computer can use it. So even then, it's still difficult. Radio has always been difficult, but even now, I suppose one could say it's still difficult. Of course, if people wanted to. And I mean, a lot of cases, people don't even need to install or set up servers or anything to broadcast propaganda. They just simply need to create a Twitter or Facebook account. Very, very simple. By the way, some pub names, do well. They some are intentionally, funny or ridiculous. Some are just bizarre. I mean, at one point, some guy says I'll be over at the Queen's Head. That is, I mean, unless you notice it's capitalized and such. It's very bizarre. Yeah, because and I mean, I like that the next thing is obvious. It's a pub, but well, obvious in the sense that it doesn't show the name at least. But it is anyway, isn't it? It's just, I'll be over the Queen's Head, what, like on it, like on the crown or something. And yeah, I didn't expect a scene in a pub, since it's supposed to be a war movie, so I just didn't expect that. And and then they were talking about buckles as well. That's something I didn't expect. But, yeah, I suppose I had no idea it was a reserved industry. I don't know if it was for real, but possibly. That's funny to think about, isn't it? And yeah, but then it became warlike again. Can you see now with that guy taking offense and all? I suppose it's within this context. So I'm assuming this is why it's 2 hours long. Has about half an hour probably. Just talking, probably commandos coming out soon, and then sortie, I guess. And that's probably one of my interest trains. I don't know. Well, anyway. And yeah, there's something interesting there that I never saw before in a complete sentence like this. It makes quite a lot of sense. Be like that, keep mum. Suppose, yeah, I'm not entirely sure how mum came to existence, as in silent. Suppose, especially since it's the same language, and yeah, I suppose there will be a contrast between dad and mum and whatnot. Hmm. Strange how one would think that different meanings would evolve or different words, but somehow sometimes not. Even something as similar as silence and familiar relation. So at one point there were a bunch of tanks going into a Belgian town, it seems, and they went in so forcefully that I thought they were the enemy. It's very difficult to see how, I mean, if they were the army that was supposed to help Belgians, how that is really the way that it would be done. I mean, it's very, they smashed through a gate. That's not very friendly, is it? Hmm. But, one positive thing about this movie, I'm not sure if other war movies usually have such a thing, but instead of just focusing on a single, sort of, zooming in onto one individual or so, they do, but they're also showing maps and animated versions of uh, advancements and such, which is useful to indicate with what point this happened and how it happened for the strategy and such. I suppose that's one thing that reading has. Reading is more difficult to have to. I mean, only maps really do that, don't they? I mean, one can read, but it's slightly, it's more time consuming and such. Anyway. And yeah, clearly I overestimated how long they will stay in pubs and such. Oh no, they're fighting even before the 20-minute mark. That's, I guess, the equivalent of a modern day horror movie that has many deaths, and the first one. Anyway, you know, this is making me realize that actually, as boring as games like Call of Duty are, I mean, relatively boring in comparison to most other games, I think it's actually, I mean, unless they're actually concentrating on narrative or strategy, you know, it's more entertaining, I suppose, more interesting, more, well, video games are usually, no matter what genre they are, because at least you can participate. If you just watching endless minutes of bombs and guns being shot, it's not very exciting. As I said earlier, I'm sure it's terrifying if you actually do it. They barely seem terrified themselves. I mean, I know they're actors, but they're supposed to act the feeling. Anyway. By the way, one strategic apparent omission that there is that I'm not sure I ever thought about, but it seems to me like it would be much easier if ground troops traveled with air forces. I mean, if the enemy's forces, drop bombs and shoot from above, then it's obviously pretty hopeless for both civilians and soldiers or even tanks on the ground. So, wonder if they ever did that. Like, it seems so obvious. Uh, Forces of the same kind should surely travel together, shouldn't they? So, if there's any enemy air forces, then Ally Air Forces tackle them on. No? I mean, it's not something I ever remember seeing on screen or reading about. And, by the way, I know that they're trying to depict a happy sea voyage or something, you know, but the music is, I don't know, slightly inappropriate considering it's just the scene after, the scene where they strategize and realize that it's hopeless. Somehow old films seem to have the sort of cheer music no matter what. I mean, like, it's like they're thinking, well, it's the open sea, so let's have cheer music. I mean, the only time they won't have cheer music is if there's a storm, but it really depends on context. I'm not sure what they thought having cheer music just after, they realize they're being heavily defeated somehow, alleviate the fact that they've had such a realization. And, you know, I know it's within this context of a war, but yeah, in normal times, I don't think anyone could really check whether there's anyone in the house by throwing a brick there, right? Well, I mean, they could practically, I suppose, if there's no one and no one comes. But it's not very practical, is it? I mean, these modern times, have CCTV anyway, and just find out who did it, etc. And but then they didn't tell us. I suppose I don't know. Maybe they could have done this in normal times as well. Hmm. By the way, isn't it funny how they try to establish some sort of normalcy while helicopters, an army of helicopters, it seems, are above them, not then and there, but where they were before and after. Somehow it's all normal for a few minutes at best, with eggs and everything. Strange. And yeah, they did it again with the jaunty music, this time straight after someone dies. It's quite inappropriate, isn't it? Like, I don't know how they couldn't figure this out, but you know, even if it's the sea and it's not very stormy, it's contextually, it's not quite the most appropriate thing to have music that seems almost cartoonishly positive. I don't know. Music in old films always seemed a bit extreme, I mean, sometimes you can have mostly it is. It seems to be a sort of jaunty music mostly. There's nothing. There's not much, at least, that is subtle. I've noticed, and then you get Psycho, which was made about a decade later after this film, and that obviously has haunting music, I suppose one could say, but then you might say it's a bit too much. They intentionally use strings to create dissonance. But really, neither of these have any form of subtle middle of the road sort of music. And I assume for both to be commandeered, it's some sort of legal thing. I'm assuming where governments are able to do that to get more boats. But my mind abruptly went to pretty much the only other instance I ever heard the word used much more extensively as well, and much more comedically, and comedic to a certain extent that goes beyond. It isn't comedic. They try to be comedic, but it's a war. Like, comedy is almost inappropriate. I mean, sure, enlivens the movie a bit, I guess, but as I said, it's like the music, it makes it a bit inappropriate, at least. Anyway, the only other movie I've ever heard of, well, I think it's only in one from the franchise, but yeah, it's Pirates of the Caribbean, which obviously came out much later than this movie. Yeah, no, obviously in that instance, it had nothing to do with anything with the law, governments, or anything. It's just Jack Sparrow who uses it as a euphemism for stealing. Mm. And yeah, of course, they use jaunty music when the boats are going to the club that the guy said it was a club. I just do not know how this is practical. This was really done. I mean, how is a small boat supposed to deal with some destroyer or something? I mean, that's what the army normally uses. No, I mean any army normally has big boats with gunfire. I mean, what's the point of this? This is just yachting or sailing boats, aren't they? I don't get it. And yeah, somehow we're supposed to believe that just because they saw and noticed some injured soldiers on stretchers that these rich boat owners will also volunteer themselves to go on the front line. Yeah, doubt that happened. Also, by the way, there is a strange statue in the office of some sort of Roman guy with a tall guy, I think it is, and it seems no hands. It's a very strange statue. Why would some British military office have a statue of an ancient Roman? Yeah, I don't know if they make them deliberately uh, unconvincing. Because I mean, how do they go from complaining that the boats are being drafted, complaining about having to take them there, to volunteering to go with them? It's very highly unlikely. It seems to be like a leap of logic that is only applied in movies. Just, you know, especially the fact that, I mean, alright, when you get a group, they're more likely to agree with each other and make each other all agree to something else. But I don't know how do you go from one extreme to another in this sense. I I seriously doubt it. I mean, I mean, some would have doubts at least realistically. Somehow absolutely has no doubts. Yeah, and yeah, now they're using the jaunty music while the camera is looking at the sea from the point of view of uh, spiky metal. I mean, I wouldn't quite associate jaunty music with this kind of thing. Yeah, yeah, and yeah, it seems like they use. I think they use the actual footage of planes. It seems grainier than this. I mean, the rest was obviously mastered. It seems because well, it's not low definition, so I'm assuming must have done something recently. But the rest, the when the planes are about specifically, they're yeah, that I think was skipped. The sounds are also kind of screeching, I guess you could say. Not exactly the most pleasant sounds, but then they're not meant to be, I suppose. Um, yeah, I suppose I don't know what to think about it. It's kind of like using yeah. Uh, it would have been nice if they had a few more cartoons style like they did at the beginning. It was a sort of interesting diversion from real life, I guess. Well, they're real life, but not really real life. They're actors. Even if it's 13 years after it happened, still actors. And yeah, it's been 70 years now, so I'm not sure anyone can even act like they remember anymore now, no, unless they're really, really old anyway. And yeah, I do get why they arrested those boats, I suppose. Now it's only they weren't intended to fight anyone, only yeah, to bring soldiers back. So I don't know if it really happened or what, but I suppose people not minding going along. I suppose I think I thought there was more risk. I mean, there's still risk, but there might be a bit more, I suppose. So yeah, it makes slightly more sense now. And I had no idea, but I I always had the impression that Dunkirk was some sort of battle, but somehow it resembled the the Titanic more than anything. You know what happened on the Titanic? You know, with people trying to stay alive and surviving and be rescued. Strange. But yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I don't know how they think that somehow they not only could walk past enemy aircraft, but also go on a boat and try to leave on a boat with enemy aircraft. I mean, boats are so much slower than aircraft, and I don't know if this really happened in real life, then it's a bit of a miscalculation, isn't it? Surely. And what do you know? It seems like I spoke too early earlier. They did actually have they were at risk. In which case, yeah, I still think that it's very unlikely that some person who normally lives in luxury would volunteer to be on the front line. Very. But who knows? Who knows? Well, man, unless there are incentives of some sort, I suppose, and it's still risky. Yeah, and this is very one-sided because um, there's it's mostly British and there's a few French, but it's mostly British. And whenever uh, Germans are talking, there's no translations or anything. So, well, no, I guess there weren't translations when they were talking French either. Yeah, which just shows that it's very one-sided. Ideally, really, we should look at all angles. At the very least, translate what people are saying. Otherwise, you know. I'm wondering why there are even a couple of movies about this. There's possibly more. I don't know, but even a couple of movies. I mean, I don't know. Does the UK work in reverse of most countries? Most countries would really try to forget as much as possible any shambles that they committed, any failures. Yet the films are made of this. I mean, yeah, this is some serious failing. I mean, of all places, why would they position a large group of people on a beach? I mean, they weren't even trying. I thought I saw some of the sort of pictures at one point, but I thought they at least tried to advance themselves further or something, and that they were opposed by a larger ground force. I thought this is much worse than I even thought. I mean, they're on a beach and they're being bombed from above. I mean, it couldn't be worse if they tried. And instead of church, I don't know if this really happened in real life, but historically, but wouldn't have been better to instead, try to do something to practically ameliorate the situation? I mean, they were sitting ducks, but really they still are even more so, and they're not doing anything to ameliorate the situation. I cannot believe how many things they did that seem absurd. Like, why did they end up on the beach in the first place? Did they think they could really just get a few boats and just transport them in a few boats? Like, it wasn't obvious that, I mean, sure, they tried to do that at night, but I mean, if they were really surrounded, then it's hopeless. And they shouldn't have ended up on the beach in large numbers in the first place, in my opinion. It would have been better to just have been spread out than this, even if it's spread out and you don't get the strength in numbers. But what's the point of this? You don't get any strength at all like this. It's quite something that even at the end, even after there's failure after failure that was lethal, really. I mean, I'm assuming some of this happened in real life, and how can they use jaunty music so much? I mean, it's the most absurd thing ever. Like, I don't think there's any other music except jaunty music. They just don't. I mean, sure, they don't use it while there's planes above bombing them, but they just use silence. But I mean, what's the point of using jaunty music any other time? It's the most inappropriate music for such a film. I mean, was um like failure after failure, and then suddenly just because a bigger boat came by. So just a bit of luck. I don't know if this really happened in real life because don't boats don't just happen to. And how did they have any succeed in even going halfway? I mean, in daylight when they couldn't at night. It defies belief. I don't know how much of this is real, but I'll know soon, I guess. But the fact that they use jaunty music all the time is the most bizarre thing, really. Well, truly, this movie was absurd in a way. The last scene was especially symbolic of its absurdity. I'm not sure what they think doing all those ritualistic keyword things that they do in an army will achieve if you can't even strategize positions or anything else besides, being cornered on a beach. He did say so that it seems like anyone watching this would think that with one of war. Well, yeah, with the music, if music existed in real life, I guess yeah, they totally be misled to think that it's a victory somehow. But that's obviously the film specifically that does it. Um, yeah, I don't know why they even make movies out of this. It's quite pathetic, and it's pathetic that such music was used as well. The least that could have done is use appropriate music. Why jaunty music? Is it supposed to what be impressive? They're in a corner and somehow they're united because they're in a corner, and somehow it's impressive that uh, they're praying in the middle of a beach with planes overhead. It's the most absurd thing ever. It's something that someone who isn't very mentally stable usually would do. This is a large amount of people on a beach of all places. Like they'd have more shelter if they were lost in a forest. But somehow they thought that I don't know. It would have been better if that corporal guy really listened to his I don't know buddies or whatever, just to stay in that house. They had more chance there, yet they ended up losing some people because they left. It's an absurd situation, really. So I'm assuming the only reason why then the war was won was because of Russia, right? From my understanding of what I read. Uh, this this was it's yeah, I'm almost speechless. Like, why would movies even give it the epic treatment? I mean, it's an epic failure of anything, right? And then the movie itself isn't very appropriate to that sense either. I mean, there are people, and I'm not reading myself at this point. I'm never really very impressed with war films, but this was incredibly, I don't know, weird, inappropriately weird.